the Capitol, and I'm with Representative Alice Hausman. And today, Representative, wanted to ask you a couple of questions about bonding. And this is your area of expertise. This is your sweet spot, has been for years and years up here. I know you were very disappointed last year when the work didn't get done.
And then we worked through the summer and fall hoping there'd be a special session. But right now I have another concern, and that is because there is such urgency about each one of these. They've run out of money. They have a huge federal matches to grab onto before they lose them. And so what is starting to happen this week, all of those who are able to convince the Speaker for a standalone bill, so we passed the Rural Finance Authority loan, and that was a standalone, even though that's normally in the bonding bill. And in that discussion, they said we would also do the local road wetland replacement separately because that was urgent, and they absolutely needed this because they were out of money. So that's going to travel separately. And then I read in the newspaper in southern Minnesota that Lewis and Clark, the water project down there, because they need it urgently and they don't want to miss the 2017 construction season, they're going to come with a standalone bill and ask for $8 million out of the surplus money, and because of their political clout, they will likely get it. And I believe the governor probably will sign it because he has been very devoted to that project. And then I was just visited about the St. Louis River area of concern, the cleanup in Duluth. Because they risk losing $50 million, they came and said, could we be a standalone bill and travel separately? And finally, Garofalo, in a bad energy bill, wants to fund with the Renewable Development Fund that we had in 1994. He wants to rename that the Energy Fund and use it to fund the Duluth steam plant. And so that all of those projects that I just mentioned would normally be in the bonding bill. The dilemma, as you start peeling them off, because you need 81 votes for the bonding bill, you start to lose support. I mean, that's the argument I always make about bonding. Because it requires a supermajority, you have to put everything in the same bill to give everyone a reason. So there's a growing anxiety that I have that we may soon have a balkanized mess and as a result not get the core bonding bill.
Republicans have talked about, though, speeding the process along, introducing bills sooner in the session so that you can get a budget done in time. Is that happening? Are you seeing that?
Well, of course, Transportation Finance is my finance committee, and then Capital Investment.
That's right.
And both of them are going to be problematic. My understanding is the Speaker is holding the bonding bill as leverage for the tax bill, and the transportation bill requires the most controversial negotiating because nobody wants to raise revenues. They don't want to raise the gas tax. They don't want to raise the sales tax. So the two that I'm involved in are caught up in problematic issues. I went to the Speaker the second day and said, we can do it differently. Pass the bonding bill the first month. Doing that would give people hope. It would give people hope that we can actually do something big and early. The thing that my constituents say to me more often than anything is, Alice, why do you always save everything for the last minute? Well, we shouldn't. It's a bad habit. And as a result, we end up then making mistakes and running out of time.
Well, and in the past, negotiations have been done really outside the public eye. And Republicans have promised this year that there would be more transparency with respect to that. Are you seeing, well, obviously we haven't gotten to the negotiation point yet, but do you take their pledge in good faith, or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, they'd have to break the habits. They'd have to break the habits of the past 2 years, and I'll take bonding as an example. In 2014, when I chaired, I introduced a bill. I sat in front of my committee, the Capital Investment Committee, presented the bill. They passed it out of there. We went to Ways and Means. I sat in that committee presenting the bill. And the advantage of doing that, of moving a bill through the normal process, is all of the public hears it, they all know what's in it, and they can catch if there's language that isn't quite right. I mean, that's when you kind of sort through the process of, is the bill ready? And we didn't do that the last 2 years, and I'm hoping we do it this year, but we've already passed 2 vehicle bills to the Ways and Means Committee,
Yes.
and I'm hoping that doesn't mean that we end up attaching an amendment somewhere other than the Capital Investment Committee.
Understood. So early on when we started out, you were in the weeds a lot with,
Yes.
I'm not sure our viewers are going to understand. Like, so when we get to bonding, we get to the question of bonding. It didn't happen last year. There was these negotiations to hang up. Do you know, Representative Hausman, what the sticking points are from a Republican standpoint and why we can't get, or Democrats for that instance, or for that matter, why we can't get bonding done?
Well, I think the Speaker has been very clear at public meetings that he intends to hold the bonding bill as leverage for a tax bill. He's been very open about
The
that.
governor.
No, the Speaker.
The Speaker. Speaker Dowd.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's a clear indication to us that he intends to hold it till the end. The risk you run is if you start tying too many things as leverage against everything else,
Yeah.
for the last minute, that's when you run out of time.
Well, that's exactly what happened last session, and even that's a spillover from the session before,
Yes.
when people weren't given very much time to review the final bills, and that's happened with both Republicans and Democrats in charge. What's the end game, though? Because Representative Hausman, Governor Dayton won't sign a bill he doesn't understand.
Well, I've not given up. I'm still, and I'm hoping tomorrow to again talk to Representative Erdahl, who, by the way, I think would happily pass a bill early. And I know Senator Senjum, I've met with him. I think they both are eager to do their work. So
Of course,
maybe,
they have a lot slimmer, situation over there. They have to cooperate with their colleagues.
Exactly. Yeah, the Senate is that's an interesting one. We have the special special election coming up.
Right, that's right.
Is that a week from today?
I think so. Yeah.
So we'll have a new House member, but we don't have the close
No?
votes that they have in the Senate.
Well, okay, and a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. But President Donald Trump has been in office for about 3 weeks now, and he issued the immigration ban, and that's created a lot of concern. What are you hearing from your constituents with respect to that, if anything?
Well, what I have heard from my constituents is a re-engagement. What they realize is, we're going to start paying attention. We're going to be down at the legislature. I think there is a sort of a reawakening to say, we have to get involved in this process. Now, the interesting thing about the Trump actions, Cargill has already indicated their concern about doing away with the trade deals,
Right.
because their business and farmers in the state have an issue there, and Cargill has I think come out against the immigration ban because, again, they're a global company. This idea of moving across borders is essential for their economic health and competitiveness. So interestingly, Cargill has come out against 2 of the major Trump initiatives.
Any stories, personal stories from your constituents? Have they come to the Capitol to talk to you, called you, sent you emails about their frustration regarding the immigration issue?
Over and over.
What are they saying?
Well, and I will tell you, the one isn't from my district, but I talked to the mayor of Rochester. Mayo has something like 18 people working on trying to get their patients to Mayo.
Right.
They come from all over the world. And so that's just one real issue where, again, something very important to the state of Minnesota, Mayo Clinic, has to divert staff time to just figuring out how do we get our patients into the country.
Is it still Mayor Ardell Breedy? Is that it?
Correct.
Okay. And so let me ask you then, okay, we've heard from some constituents. Betsy DeVos, she was, I guess, passed, confirmed today with
She
a
was this
historic
noon.
vote.
Yes.
Vice President had to cast the deciding vote.
With every Democrat voting no and 3 Republicans voting no. And as a result of the 3 Republicans voting no, there was a tie, and then the Vice President, for the first time ever, I think, had to cast a vote for the Supreme Court nominee. And I know that, the major issue here is we have a strong commitment in this state to a strong system of public education. And what we know is true of her state, where she was involved in some of the charter schools, they haven't done very well there. I mean, we have a good system of charter schools here, but they are part of the public school system. But it makes a difference how you shape those education choices. And we fear that, that her experience doesn't encourage us that she will understand public education.
Well, I know you're sort of well, you are a policy wonk. You're especially bonding is your sweet spot, but the governor has put his budget out there. Have you had a chance to comb through however many hundreds of pages that is yet?
Well, I have some. Now, I have one particular interest, as you know, the Bell Museum.
Yes.
There's a new museum getting built at the corner of Larpenteur and Cleveland, and the university had asked for some operating money for that. Unfortunately, I think that was the only thing in their request that got totally zeroed out by the governor. And so I have some work to do. We assume that when that museum is built, K-12 kids from all around the state will come. They're already talking about innovative programming for high school kids that they haven't had. So between the Natural History Museum and the planetarium, which will be there, yes, we do believe that there will be a far greater involvement from the whole K-12 system. But additionally, there is some interesting work around agricultural education that will take place. I think I have some good talking points to talk to both the K-12 chair and the higher ed chair to resurrect a little bit of that request.
It sounds like you have to go and talk to Governor Dayton, right? I mean, he's the one that's zeroed it out.
Now my conversation has to be with my House colleagues to
Okay.
get it in their bill. That will be the priority.
Okay, very good. Anything else on your mind? Anything you're seeing the Republicans doing that you're appreciating so far?
Well, I have very good working relationships with, I did last year with Representative Torkelson, and I do this year with Representative Erdahl. So I feel very comfortable about knowing that I'll be able to be part of that conversation. The most alarming thing to me right now is what's happening in Representative Garofalo's committee, because one, he's taking the power away from the Public Utilities Authority. There's 3 bills. I think we're going to hear them on the House floor Thursday. The Public Utilities Authority Commission is PUC, yeah, is the thing that was created to protect the consumer,
Yeah, it's a
from
regulatory body.
exactly, and from high energy costs. All 3 of those bills go around that process of certificate of need, et cetera. Additionally, they go backward. They take us backward on solar energy. We're out of step with even Midwestern states, Iowa. Everyone has acknowledged that that's a good direction to go. But he goes backward in, I think, at least 2 of those bills have the effect of taking us backward, and they get rid of the Made in Minnesota solar program. So that I think is the most alarming in terms of how they reverse energy policy that we've had and how fast they're moving.
Well, anything good coming out of their caucus? Are you seeing them propose any legislation that you feel good about?
Well, Eric Pratt in the Senate is trying on the Real ID thing to do the right thing, I believe. And I think he's been a supporter, I hope I'm not misrepresenting him, of that driver's license provision. I mean, that he wants it out of the bill because he believes we shouldn't put up barriers to the driver's license. So yeah, I think I've been impressed with his work on the Real ID bill.
And tell me the concern Democrats have around Real ID again.
Well, we had no problem with Real ID. I mean, we're saying, yes, we have to do it. I mean, unless something changes in Washington, you don't want to have a passport to fly around the United States. And so we need to do it. What we wanted was a clean bill. And what they have done instead is they have attached that driver's license language. We believe it is in everybody's public safety interest to have undocumented workers be able to have a driver's license. Early on, when that issue came up, it wasn't even controversial. Republicans and Democrats understood if we have someone driving on our roads, it's in everybody's interest to have them trained. If they're licensed, that means they've been trained, and that means they have insurance. Mm-hmm. And that's in everybody's best interest. We want every driver on the road trained and insured. But that has now been caught up in the whole anti-immigrant feeling of some. So that's what's complicated the real ID discussion.
Sure. Very good, Representative Hausman. What's on your agenda for this, specifically for this legislative session? We just talked to Rep. Cretia, and he had some things. What do you want to put forward?
Well, the big one is I want a comprehensive bonding bill that does higher education and wastewater infrastructure and parks and trails and the whole thing. For me personally, what has become the all-consuming passion is housing. Nothing in life goes well if you don't have a safe place to sleep at night. And we simply are not building the kind of housing that's affordable there are families with children who have jobs, but they can't find an affordable place to live. There are seniors over 55 whose annual income is less than $30,000, and we're not building housing for them. That's a growing population of people who are homeless. So that's become sort of all-consuming to me, and you can't be involved in housing very long before you realize we have to reform the mental health system and we have to reform the criminal justice system. Both, when you get involved in housing, you begin to understand the barriers we put up for certain groups of people to be able to find a place to live.
Yeah. Is it true, Representative Hausman, I don't know where I read this recently, but is it true it costs more to incarcerate an inmate per year than it would be to help them with public housing?
Absolutely. In fact, Utah was the first state that discovered this. Even not incarcerating them, even having them homeless, meaning they might end up in an emergency room or hospital. So Utah discovered that having homeless people was costing them more than just providing the housing for them. And of course, surrounding it with supportive services that you hope get them to a better place in life. And so I think that's very, very clear that were we to solve this issue of homelessness, we would save money.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Representative Hausman. Appreciate it as always.
Good to be with you.
All right. That's it from the Capitol. More next week.